Thank you for tuning in to the community conversation brought to you by Prototype Training System, home of CrossFit Prototype. Sam and I are back with another nutrition episode to help provide you with some education and some strategies to better your nutrition while still enjoying your social life. There's a lot of misinformation on nutrition. We wanted to aim to provide you with some clarity on some of these topics. Today, we wanted to talk about intermittent fasting in particular, and some of the claims behind intermittent fasting in regards to weight loss. So we'll start a little general with Sam. What is intermittent fasting exactly?
Okay, so in preparation for this, I looked it up, and turns out there's a ton of different kinds of intermittent fasting. I think when we think of intermittent fasting, we think like skipping breakfast, like not eating in the morning and then eating in like an 8-hour window from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. and then fasting for another 16 hours, which is like the 16-8 or 8-16 method. I forget which way the numbers go. But I've seen apparently on the internet, there's a lot of different ones of like, you do 5 days of normal eating and then 2 days a week where you like basically fast all day. There's like a handful of different types, but I think for today, we're focusing mostly on like the 16-8 concept when it comes to intermittent fasting. You eat in a very small window of time. And then outside that window, all you're having is just something to drink, like water, maybe coffee, but nothing of nutritional value.
So basically, the only thing you can have is stuff that doesn't contain calories.
Yeah, pretty much. Unless you wanted to talk about something different, John, but I think this is the track we're going.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the rule of intermittent fasting, I guess. You can have like black coffee, tea, and water. And I don't think there's anything else that you can. I don't think that you're able to have any form of 0-calorie beverages or anything like that, because there's some added vitamins and minerals and the small traces of calories. So it's like a 0-calorie type of thing. Okay, so why would someone do intermittent fasting, or why would someone consider doing intermittent fasting based off of some of the claims out there?
Yeah, so probably the most common one is weight loss. I feel like this is another fad diet that has made its way into the forefront of, I don't know if it's the media or like just like the nutrition world in the last couple of years of it has been a successful weight loss diet for a handful of people. So it's kind of gained some traction of people who want to lose weight find that intermittent fasting might work for them. I guess there's several claims about other things like it raises your metabolic rate, it lowers your risk of diabetes, like it changes your cholesterol, it changes your gut health. There's like a lot of different ones, but I think by and large, the same reason someone looks to a keto diet of like, they want to lose weight, nothing, quotes, air quotes, nothing is working. And so this seems like the next solution, which we're probably going to talk about in a little bit of depth of like, intermittent fasting can be a solution or like a way to lose weight, but it's not necessarily going to be the best way to lose weight. Now, John, do you want to start talking about that a little bit of like, why does intermittent fasting work as a weight loss diet?
So I think the theory behind intermittent fasting is that because you're not eating for 16 hours, your body is essentially just going to be running off of your reserves, right? So if we think like that, if we just think black and white, it's 100% true. If you're not consuming anything, your body is still needing energy. So your body is going to oxidate adipose tissue, so body fat. But as soon as we consume calories, then your body starts using the calories you've consumed as energy. So the argument is intermittent fasting a better alternative to just a calorie restricted diet where we don't necessarily eat all of our calories in only an 8-hour window, but we eat throughout the day? Is there any benefit to doing one over the other? And based off of some of the research out there, there's like some pros and cons to each thing. the pros is that for some people, eating in an 8-hour window is more satiating for them to consume all their calories in a shorter period of time. So that leads to consuming fewer calories. Now, does that mean that within 8 hours you can't over consume your calories and put yourself in a calorie surplus? You certainly can do that, but it might be more difficult to do that in a smaller window of time. So that's part of why there's some benefits for some people to do that, because it just makes it more difficult to overconsume calories. But from what we've been reading up on, is now the argument is it more beneficial in the sense of weight loss, or is it more beneficial in the sense of fat loss when we compare eating all of our calories in an 8-hour window or just consuming our calories throughout the day? Let's say it was calories equated through both methods. So Sam, I want to talk about that a little bit. What was some of the research that we just read upon when comparing intermittent fasting and just a calorie controlled diet where you're still eating in a calorie deficit? What were some of the comparisons between the two?
I feel like you should talk about this. This comes from your favorite guy in the world. I'll get started and then I'll let you finish it out. But basically, when you're eating calorie restriction, typically you're balancing out your macronutrients a little better than you would in like a time restriction. Because if you're thinking like I'm eating a weight loss diet, typically you're going to put focus or emphasis on protein and like then add in the carbs and fats. Versus eating in this 8-hour window, there's no restriction on the foods that people are eating. So eating habits might not necessarily change. And so someone would eat between that 8-hour window and be in a natural calories deficit, but still be eating low protein. So there's not as much fat loss, but there's overall muscle loss. But I want to let you talk about it. This guy is like, what's his name again? Layne Norton.
Well, Layne Norton. So he broke down a study that was comparing a calorie restricted diet and a diet done the intermittent fasting format. So essentially just you can either eat all your calories in an 8-hour window or not. And they gave them a little bit of like education on how a healthy diet should look. But they didn't give them like a necessarily a calorie range or or even like macros or anything like that. So they didn't get any guidance in that. And the reason why they didn't get any guidance in those areas is because they wanted to see like if someone was doing intermittent fasting, if they would just consume fewer calories because they're eating in a shorter window of time versus the other group that was monitoring their calories. And the results were that both groups, because both groups were focusing on controlling their calories in some way, both groups lost weight, but the difference was that the group that was doing intermittent fasting, I should just take a step back. So if you lose weight, let's say you lose 10 pounds, there's going to be some of that weight that's going to come from lean body mass. Okay. There's not ever going to be a 100% all pure fat loss without losing any form of lean body mass. If you lost 100 pounds, it wouldn't just be 100 pounds of fat. There would be some muscle loss in there. And just think like simply because your body doesn't need to have that much muscle if it's not carrying around that much weight. So anyways, they compared the two groups, the one doing fasting and one just doing calorie restricted, and they both lost weight. But the difference was that the group that was restricting your calories and eating whenever they wanted throughout the day, they lost, I think it was like 30% lean body mass. Now the group that was doing intermittent fasting lost 65% lean body mass. So the theory behind this, even though you don't know how much protein they're exactly having in, is there's fewer opportunities to eat protein throughout the day in an 8-hour window, and protein's super satiating. So it's going to be hard to meet protein requirements in a shorter period of time. And since it is more filling, it's also going to make it easier to not get enough, just for that simple fact that protein's more satiating. And if you were eating just protein in your 8-hour window, it would leave you pretty low energy overall with everything else you're consuming. But there's other research out there on protein and timing and things like that when it comes to, if you're having protein every 3 to 4 hours and somewhere between the, I think it was like 20 to 50 gram range, you're going to have what's called muscle protein synthesis. So it's going to have an elevated response. So that just means that you're going to, you almost think like there's like this, like, I know if anyone's listening on Spotify, they're not going to see my hands, but if there was like a, a back and forth, like teeter totter, you're going to have breakdown and muscle protein synthesis, right? When your body is under breakdown, your muscle protein synthesis is lower, right? Because you're essentially, you've put stress on the body with muscle breakdown. Now, when you aren't working out, right, that breakdown is going to start to go down. That's basically, recovering, right? Muscle protein synthesis is what's aiding us in recovery. If we have enough protein into our diet, muscle protein synthesis is going to be more elevated. And if we can have more feedings of protein throughout the day, then that is going to make it so you're going to optimize maintaining muscle, for the fact that you're keeping that protein synthesis higher than you would if you were to only have protein in 1 to 2 feedings. So if you're eating for 16 hours versus just 8 hours, you could probably feed yourself like 4 or 5 servings of protein. But if you're only eating in 8 hours, then, you're probably only having anywhere between 1 to 2, because most people use intermittent fasting as a strategy to only have 1 or 2 big meals. And there is an upper limit. That's why, I mentioned that, 20 to 50 grams is kind of where you're, if you have more than 50 grams, it's not like your body doesn't absorb protein, but you don't really get too much more benefit after having more than that. So you can't go ahead and have, if you're 200 pounds, have 200 pounds of protein in one sitting and get the same benefit as you would if you spread out and had 4 servings of 50 grams. So it's basically what's happening is in that study is that it probably just came down to the people weren't consuming either enough protein, or they just weren't getting the same benefits as they would if they were to spread it out. So the guy that actually did the study, which Lane Norton does a really good job breaking down these studies. So if you don't follow BioLane's his Instagram page, if you're like interested in nutrition like we are, he's someone that I always look up to. He explains that the guy that did the study, once he got the results of the study, person that did the study did intermittent fasting because they lost weight doing it, and they did a study to see if that was the reason why. And after they did the study, they realized that the results weren't exactly what he expected. So he changed his diet and stopped doing intermittent fasting, so he could have more feedings of food throughout the day, because he just compared the two groups. If you can, have protein more often than not, then, you're probably going to benefit more than not.
Definitely. And another interesting thing that came out of that too is it sounds like the group that was intermittent fasting decreased their exercise unintentionally.
Yeah.
So like that could be a big part of it too, of like if your exercise routine has changed, muscle mass might decrease with that as well. Now, is that because they're not being fueled like they were normally? Is that because like they're lethargic in the morning because they haven't eaten anything? So people decrease the amount that they were moving around. I don't know. The jury's still out on that, but definitely something to note. Like if you're fasting for it's 16 hours. Like if you're not eating or getting any kind of nourishment for 16 hours, like the body might make natural adaptations to that. And like what that might be is less exercise or like fewer steps, I think is what the actual result was in that study. Because our bodies are smart. If we don't feed it, it doesn't want to move.
Bodies are super smart. So if we look at things from like an evolutionary standpoint, right? So some of us aren't hungry in the morning for breakfast, and so we don't have breakfast. Okay, now why may that happen is that your body is pretty smart and sees that as there's no point in wasting energy by signaling hunger that you're not, since you don't eat breakfast, why signal hunger? Well, signal hunger when you typically eat. So this is how we get into patterns of doing things. Well, I'm not hungry for breakfast, so that's why I don't have breakfast. But we get into patterns, so your body doesn't signal that you're hungry in the morning because you don't typically eat breakfast. The same way as if you, do intermittent fasting and you typically eat your first meal at 1 o'clock, the first day of doing intermittent fasting, it might be really hard, but anyone that's ever encouraged you to do intermittent fasting, like, no, I'm not even hungry. Like I have so much energy. It's all kind of like, a little bit more like anecdotal, as well as like, this is how I feel. So, this might work for you as well. If you're normally hungry for breakfast, just eat breakfast. Like, you don't have to fight that. But if you're not hungry for breakfast, that strategy might work for you, right? But there's not, I guess what we're saying is that there's not really magic to the whole, if you eat in this window of time, that you're going to have increased benefits, because just based off of the research that's out there, there's not
Right.
going to, it's not, you can do either or. It's not to say that one is better or worse than the other. It's probably more important to be able to sustain whatever approach. I know some people that do intermittent fasting, and they're pretty well educated on the fact that it's just easier for them to adhere to. It's just like, maybe their mornings are super busy, so it's just easier to go ahead and not have to think about one more thing of eating breakfast. So they have, their routine is that they eat lunch, maybe a couple snacks, and dinner. If it works for you, it's fine. But if you're doing it because you think that it is, the better alternative, then, you don't have to do it.
Have you ever tried intermittent fasting?
I have, yeah. I
How'd it
think I
go?
did intermittent fasting I think I did it for, I don't know, 3 months. And I, it wasn't, it was exactly how I just explained. It wasn't like the first week I was like, I felt like I was fighting hunger in the morning. And then after a while I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. But when your schedule gets busy and you're, have back to back to back to back, either coaching classes or I have training, and I can't eat for 7 hours, and then I have more stuff to do after that. Me not having breakfast is too long of a time for me to go without having a meal. I can't wait until, almost dinner time might be the next time where it's available. I have time during lunch, but I'm just not able to get my calorie needs. And if anyone knows me, I always get shit on that I'm like this little guy. So I'm eating a lot of food, guys. I'm trying my best. I probably consume like close to 3,000 calories a day, and I can't do that without breakfast. So for me, I need breakfast because my next opportunity to eat is probably like 11. So I eat around at 4 a.m. and then I may not have anything besides a protein shake until like 11 or 12. So I would feel exhausted if I continue that. So when I did do it, I did it, but then I realized like my energy was so low. I was tired leading up to my first meal. And if I don't have to, then I kind of thought that it was better, like a better approach for, just like health in general, but seems that there's no difference in blood markers or anything like that. And when you eat all your calories in 8 hours, so you hear like, okay, well, if you do intermittent fasting, gives your body a break and stuff like that. But if you're eating all your calories in 8 hours, guess what? Your blood sugar is going to be higher in that 8-hour window than it normally would in a stable day. Your insulin level is going to spike higher, and it's going to stay higher in that period of time because you're eating more frequently versus spreading your calories out. So
Yeah. And for what it's worth, like
I
our
just
body,
felt tired. I felt more tired because I felt like my body was constantly trying to digest the next meal. And then I was like, okay, like I need to get more calories in again. Yeah. So,
and we have a natural rhythm, like our blood sugar spikes and drops naturally. And so like if we feed at like the normal breakfast, lunch, and dinner time, like those are when the body naturally drops lower blood sugar. So it's like it makes sense that we typically feed at like 8 a.m. at noon we snack at 3 p.m. and then we eat dinner around like 6 p.m. Like there's a reason for that, because like that's like the body's natural rhythm of blood sugar drops.
Right.
So if you like ignore that in the morning, no wonder like lunch rolls around and then you're starving. Also, when you wake up at 3 in the morning, like you can't wait until noontime to have your first meal. That's absurd.
No.
It can't feel good.
Yeah, so didn't work for me, but know some people that it works well for. So
Mhm.
not a this is the point of all these episodes on the podcast, guys, is to have you guys be more informed so you can be better critical thinkers about, you know, some of the stuff you might hear on, I don't know, if you turn on Dr. Oz, you might be saying that this is the best thing for your health, when, you know, there's got to be, we got to think more critically about some of the claims that are out there, because it's really hard to know like what's true, what's false. So kind of think about, if anything sounds like it's like this magic solution, it's probably a little overblown, and it's probably just a marketing tool to get you to either purchase a product or buy a service. And you know, that's the main point of what we're trying to give you guys, is more clarity. So when you guys make decisions with your nutrition, it's based off of science-based education and not just like you know, just
Not
you know,
all anecdotes.
yeah, exactly, not
Which,
all
like we
this
could
work.
talk about, right? Like you've seen people try things. You've tried things. Like you could talk about that all day, but is that based in science? Well, I mean, yeah, because you know it. But you can't just say like, oh, this worked really well for my aunt, so I'm gonna try it now, which is what I think people do a lot of time when they hear about intermittent fasting or keto or any of those other fad diets. So yeah,
Right.
read the papers. And if you don't want to read the papers, ask us to read the papers. Or watch the other people who do read the papers and break it down nice and smooth for everyone to understand.
Right.
Did you have anything else, John, about this topic that you wanted to touch on today?
um Nothing's coming to mind at the moment, but I mean, questions, guys, really help us be able to know what you're curious about, what you would like to learn more about, so then we can help best we can. Even if it seems like a silly question, just message us. We won't use your name. But no, I don't have anything to add more to this. I guess we could just summarize by, intermittent fasting can be a tool for weight loss, but it's definitely not a magic solution. Um, you know, you got to see whether or not, if it is something that you were thinking about experimenting with. You know, just think about a little bit of what we talked about, is what's the goal and how sustainable is that based off of your schedule, your life, and you know, would that make things easier or harder for you to go ahead and adhere to that type of diet?
Yeah, exactly. So with that being said, if you have any more questions, reach out. If you have suggestions for future podcasts, let us know. And we hope you have a wonderful day.